Hi there, I'm Michael Sankey. I'm Director of Learning Futures and Lead Education Architect here at Charles Darwin University. It's my very great pleasure to be doing this very short presentation on navigating peer learning in the hybrid world. First of all, I am coming to you from Larrakia land up here in Darwin, and do acknowledge all First Nations peoples across the lands on which we live and work, and pay respect to elders both past and present. In this little presentation, it's not going to go for long, I'm going to talk about the power of the peer in many different forms. I'm going to talk about peer assessment, peer assistance, which of course many of us are familiar with, peer learning, peer collaboration, and around that I place this notion of the virtual space and how increasingly we're seeing this happening in the virtual space. The power of the peer, I suppose we've seen over recent years a greater emphasis being placed on peer activities, particularly within the curriculum and more so in the online space, because of the pandemic, particularly. And we all rushed into online very quickly and found different ways in which to use that online space. And so it takes many forms. We're talking about the collaborative space that we use here in Microsoft Teams. Some universities use Slack, but that's been a particular boon to activities that we run across the campus and are associated with our units. More so than things like discussion forums, which are a little bit past their use by date, maybe, should I say. But we're seeing far more use of collaborative and peer collaboration tools. The rise of peer assessment and tools such as Feedback Fruits, and I'll come back to that, other tools like that, of course. The rise of online PASS. We've done, many of us have done PASS for a long time, but we've seen a lot more activity happening in the online space, particularly for an institution like ours, which is heavily distance education. The rise in reflection tools too, such as personal reflection tools, such as e-portfolios and other personal identity tools that we see out there on the market. Why? Well, I suppose Donald Ford says it's because we've seen a greater emphasis being placed on this in preparing students for the workplace, particularly in relation to social mobility and employability, and the ability to be able to get on and work with one's peers. Let's first look at assessment. So as educators, we, particularly myself and yourself, we're used to being peer assessed. I mean, we write articles, we write books, we do all kinds of things. We expect our peers to give us feedback, and that makes us better. That makes it better at what we do and helps us hone what we do. And particularly as I do a lot of peer reviewing, I read what other academics are doing and can contribute to what they're thinking and researching as well. In the workforce, we see teams working together. We see in most major businesses now, teams working collaboratively, and we're seeing the use of the tools I mentioned before, like Microsoft Teams used to do that collaboration. We're seeing the advance of some fantastic peer assessment tools within our online space. For a while, we've had this notion of PeerMark, which is in Turnitin. There's a product, an Australian product called Spark Plus. It's been used by many institutions across Australia. A particular favourite of mine is Feedback Fruits. It's quite elegant. It's not cheap, but it's very elegant and a great tool for peer assessment and group evaluations, etc. Most LMSs now have built in peer assessment tools. We have the workshop module in Moodle. Canvas has their own tool, as does Anthology Blackboard as well, and their peer assessments in their fairly rudimentary state, but they're still very good peer assessment tools. Let's move on to assistance. So assistant comes in many forms, as we know. We have our PASS at CDU, as you will have at your institution. We have our mentoring programs, our informal gatherings, our belonging. It's really important that our students feel as they belong in clubs and networks and communities. And the social media, mostly we try and keep that reasonably private, but we know that our students are heavily using social media to communicate with each other and, of course, their groups. But we and our academics need to be conscious of all these different elements that are being used and engaging with the data associated with them, particularly for those systems that we have in place. We have at the moment 14, this semester, we have 14 PASS groups in place, and we've got Kelly there and Edson and Nicole and Michael and Katie and Sanetta and a number of others who are doing a fantastic job working with their fellow students in their particular PASS groups. And this is, of course, so fundamental now to the way we support our students, and it's widely recognised across the sector. Our mentoring Our mentoring program is loved by our students. Our peer mentoring program has been fundamentally beneficial to me as a first-year student. And the next one, I cannot overstate how valuable the peer mentoring program has been for me. And I'm involved in mentoring at the sector level with many directors and those aspiring to be directors, and it's exactly the same for our students. We have, of course, our student portal, and you all have student portals. This is a fairly new one at CDU, and we're basing that off the back of Office 365, and it's been taken up really well by the students because it's a tool they use every day anyway. We have our social networks, and we use the Viva Engage product as one of those things. This is obviously a staff view, but the students have exactly the same view across their different networks and the communities. So communities are a really big element associated with universities, as you know. Now we're going to talk a bit about learning and the power of peer in learning. This is a particularly good book that I've come across, and in this we're talking about peer learning in the form of various collaborative learning models has become the dominant approach in higher education to foster learning, engagement, and development of well-rounded graduates. Amen to that. So that's one of the authors here is our very good friend David Bowd from Deakin University in there. Fantastic book. Collaboration. Well, I really do think it's our role to help every student learn how to work with their peers. I mean, they're going to be doing it in the workplace. It's been found that peer collaboration, when combined with peer assessment, yielded better outcomes as compared to peer assessment alone. It also has benefits for our teachers, particularly when we see our students as collaborators. And it's kind of changing that mindset for teachers, that students aren't just empty vessels waiting to be filled, but they are potential collaborators in building learning, particularly within the hybrid space. This has become really prominent because it was a much more natural thing to do in the classroom to talk to students and things like that. But now we're starting to find, as we've become much more used to the online space, that this has started to increase considerably. But it's really important that we scaffold this for our students. So it's not just like saying, okay, let's do this, and here's the spaces you go away and collaborate. We've really got to model that collaboration and scaffold it for them. Even provide a little workshop at the beginning of our units of study of this is what we're doing. And it's the same with the PASS, as we're working with our PASS students to see them scaffolded into this particular element. So why? Well, the student shows a demand for this type of activity, which they rate very highly. Specifically, the students acting as teachers and those peers believe that this activity increases their motivation for the subject of their performance, while likewise feeling that it makes a significant improvement in their creativity and communication skills. And further, building students' self-efficacy through the ability to collaborate with their peers in learning has become essential in strengthening students' academic performance in the blended learning space and their ability to demonstrate self-regulated learning. Noting that's in the blended space. And you'll notice also that these are very recent citations that I'm giving here. What about our virtual space? So as universities, we have this complex mix of different technologies we use. We have in the middle here, we have our student and curriculum management systems. We have our learning management systems, our productivity and communication tools, like that student portal and Teams and things like that. We have our content management systems and library systems that manage all the readings and things like that for us. We have our lecture capture systems and media streaming systems, our e-portfolio tools and evidence rendering tools. And of course, virtual conferencing softwares like Zoom, just like I'm using here, Teams, Collaborate, all those different virtual classroom tools. And of course, for our systems, we have data that we can gather to and analytics that we can understand what our students are doing. But really for the students, we're also looking at these things around the outside. These things are social media platforms that they're engaging with, the web apps and educational tools like the Feedback Fruits and the peer assistant tools that we have, the educational resources, open educational resources that we're asking our students to engage with to keep the cost down, as it were. Our third-party content streaming services, things like TEDx and YouTubes and things like that. Our professional identity tools like LinkedIn, and our academic integrity and writing tools, our Grammarly's, our Turnitins and things like that. Things we don't get a lot of data back into the university for, for around the analytics, but they're fantastic tools to engage our students with. Now, for us and for our academics, we need to understand our space, this contemporary technology-enhanced learning space, the ecology that we have, and start to be provocateurs, to really promote the use of these different tools within our particular environment. So for us, we use Blackboard Ultra, we use Microsoft Teams, Blackboard Ally for those who are struggling to deal with the content. We use Blackboard Collaborate, Zoom, Teams, Feedback Fruits, Kaltura, all those different tools. You'll have your own mix of tools, but you need to be conscious of what those tools are and be very proactive in the use of those tools with our students, for them, not just in their teaching and learning, but also in their peer collaboration work. So my challenge to you is be all things peer, not just about peer assistance, but all things peer. We need you to be advocates for this. We need you to be promoters of it. We need you to be provocateurs for, and we need you to be passionate for the opportunities that technology-enhanced learning can provide you. Here are the references that I've used, and thank you for the very brief opportunity to share these thoughts with you.